It's time to add the backing and the 3D embellishments to the Sippin on Sunshine Quilt. I'm going to be adding the backing, and when I make wall hangings, I will just add the backing fabric with the wrong side up. This is the cute overall pattern for the background if you got the fabric kit. And then I just put the quilt on top, and I do not add an extra layer of batting. However, if you want to add an extra layer, you would just cut your batting to the size of your quilt, probably a little bit bigger, and attach that and then trim before adding your binding. I have made lots of blankets and I don't feel that I need an extra layer, and it does make it heavier, but you could easily add that. So what I'm going to do is just put these wrong sides together. I am going to pin and stitch in the ditch. Now when I stitch in the ditch, I am going to start in the middle of the quilt and kind of work my way out. And so what I'll probably do is start around the baskets. This is about the middle of the quilt. I will probably do this horizontal seam and come all the way to that inner border, and then I will come down and do the seam right below the baskets and the grass, and then I will keep working my way down, just doing the horizontal seams. Then when that is done, I will come back up and do any of the horizontal seams above the baskets. And then all of those horizontal seams will be done, and it will be just to where they come to the inner border. Then I will just, turn my quilt and do the vertical seams and do all of the other direction. And so when I'm done doing the horizontal and vertical seams, I will have the entire center quilted. Then once that's done, I will go around along the inside of this inner border. Let me pull this over. This is so big. I will go around the inside of the border and then along the outside. And for the top, where this little piece connects, I could either just go around the actual inner border and not do this, and then come back and just finish those four little pieces on each corner. Or I could, let's say I'm coming up this, I could stop on the outside of this inner border, restart, and then take the seam along here and go to the outside of the border. And I just kind of do whatever I'm in the mood. It doesn't really matter. However, if you stop here and add here, that might just be faster and you wouldn't have to go back and do that. Then once all of the seams have been stitched in the ditch, I will go around the outside about 1/8 of an inch and just stitch that down so that the border and the sides will be attached to the backing. And so that is my first step, and that's going to take a while. This is a big quilt, and I'm of course just doing this on a regular sewing machine, and I'm just going to take my time. Now for the thread, I will be using my clear monopoly thread as well as the bobbin. However, you could probably just use a white bobbin on the back. I typically just use monopoly on both. And for something like these pinwheels, I haven't decided if I'm just going to do the seams, around the outside. I'm not sure I'm going to do any of the seams on the inside. I may, once everything's finished, look at it, and if it seems poofy, I may add a stitch down maybe the center, the horizontal center, but I'm not sure. But there's a lot There's a lot of seams on this. This was such a fun project, but there are a lot of seams, of course, that don't connect, and so there will be a lot of starting and stopping. I will, um, back stitch at the beginning and the end. So for example, this is just going to be one, and then I would, come down here and do these whole seams. And you just need to take your time and kind of go methodical so that you don't miss anything. All right, so that is going to be my first step. After all of the stitch in the ditch is done, then I'm going to go ahead and add the 3D embellishments. And there's really actually not a whole lot for this quilt. There's some buttons and a bow, and I think that little 3D banner that we made. A lot of the embellishments we either already put on, like these dragonfly wings, or kind of the 3D element was actually used when we stitched on a lot of these leaves that look 3D, or the grapes that have a lot of layers, the vinyl, the little baskets that have the little napkins coming out. So a lot of the 3D elements that we have are actually made when we stitch this out. So there's just a handful that will need to be sewn on. Now I will use just quilting pins. I have some curved pins just because they're easy to take in and out that I will put around to keep the backing and everything straight so that it doesn't shift. However, as I do stitch in the ditch, I do kind of make sure that things are flattened. I will put these not next to a seam or not too close to a seam where my presser foot would hit it, or that I would have to take it out before stitching in the ditch. So I'll just randomly put these in the centers, and then a couple, several around the borders, just to keep everything together. All right, so that's my first step, is to add all the pins, and then I can go to my machine. So I'm back from the mountains, and I have my quilt that I'm ready to trim around the edges to get the excess fabric off and put my embellishments on. Now the back looks really good. I have, all of the seams with the stitch in the ditch with the mono poly thread. Now the only thing that when I was up in the mountains, I didn't have a really big table to lay the whole quilt out and pin it. So when I'm trimming the sides, you might notice that it starts closer and then it gets a little bit wider and wider, and that's just because when I pinned, I pinned a portion from where I sewed like the baskets up, and then I unpinned and smoothed the quilt, and so it just wasn't quite even that way. Luckily, this is an all over print and that doesn't really matter. However, I am more even at the top. However, it does go from a little bit more up here down to a little bit smaller amount. So if you notice that when I'm trimming up, that's why. So the first thing I'm going to do is square each of the corners, and I'm going to do that by taking a large ruler, and I am going to line it up with my outer border. When I put my ruler in the corner, if it was a perfect world, this outer part of the inner border, so where the outer border and the inner border meet, my ruler should measure or be marked at the 4 1/4 to the end of the border. So it would be a 4 1/4 along this outer pink border, as well as 4 1/4 along the outer side, and that should be square, and it should come to the edge of the green border. Now, because this fabric has been quilted and sometimes that pulls in a little bit, so when I have my ruler lined up, if I cut, I actually have a little bit of my muslin and or the backing fabric extending past the green border fabric. And I am okay with that. That will be in the binding. I want to get this as square as I can. I don't want to automatically just cut on the outer green. I want to keep this as square as I can. So some parts may have a little bit more of this backing fabric extending than other parts, and that's just kind of the nature, I think, of embroidery and adding that to borders and stitching in the ditch and doing all of these things. So let me cut this corner and I'll show you. So in this upper corner you can see a little bit of the backing fabric extending beyond the green border. However, I do towards the end come right to that green fabric. And the same thing over here on the side, it comes right to the edge of the border, and I have a little bit of my muslin and my backing fabric that makes up that straight edge. And so this will be caught in the binding, and so again, I'm not worried about that at all. In fact, that's a good thing to have the backing, and that's one reason I leave my muslin attached to the borders, is so that if I need that to make up the full width, that I'm able to do that. So I hope that that makes sense. So I'm going to do that with each corner, and then I will just take a longer ruler and cut the space in between the two corners. So once I do this corner over here, I can do the same thing. I'll measure and I will have as square of a quilt as I can. All right, so let me start with the 4 corners. I have all of the edges and corners trimmed. I was pretty close. I had a few sections that were slightly off, but overall it was pretty square. So now to finish the top, I just need to put these buttons and the little bow, and those are the only additional things that I need to add before adding the binding and finishing the quilt. Now I am going to go to my machine and see if I can use my little button foot. I really liked using that. I'm not sure if these are going to be too wide. These holes are going to be too wide. Otherwise, I'll probably just use a regular zigzag. I could also just hand sew them on. But there are these buttons that need to be attached somehow. And that will come through to the backing, but that's fine. No one's going to see that, and it's going to look great. So let's finish up. Now with this bow, what I'll probably do is take some embroidery floss, see if I can put it through the back loop of this bow, and then attach it to the hat, tie a double knot on the back, and I think that will hold it good enough. Again, this is just a wall hanging. It probably will never be washed. So depending on how it sits, I may add just a touch of glue, but I'm not sure. So we'll just have to see how that works. All right, so I'm ready to do this. I do think I'm going to add a little bit of fray check right now while I'm getting the buttons sewn on so that this doesn't fray. Although if it frays, you know, that's okay too. But I'm going to add just a little bit of fray check on these cut ends and let that dry while I'm doing the buttons. Oh, and then I forgot the cute little banner that we stitched out. The very first thing also, of course, needs to be stitched on. So to stitch these on, I'm going to use the button stitch. And for my machine, which is a Babylock Soprano, this is my regular sewing machine. I love this machine. And I am using this stitch number 90. It just looks like a button. So when I get to my screen, I need to look for this little button on my screen and choose stitch 90. So on my screen, this is how my machine looks when I turn it on. I have it set to just do, you know, a straight center stitch. And what I need to do is find that little button that was for that set of stitches. And so I will select that. And now I can choose 90. And it will tell me that I need the button foot, which is this little foot right here. Now, I am not going to be using that for the pennant. I think I'm just going to keep my regular foot that I used to stitch in the ditch. It can do a zigzag, but this is what I'll try to use for all the buttons. And so this is set to a stitch for the button. It will do several zigzags and then it will tack off. And that is the whole series of the stitch. And so what I do normally when I do this is I have my foot pedal in. Now I can use my foot pedal. I just hold it down. The machine will do the whole entire stitch, tack off, and then stop, even if my foot is still pressed down. However, when I do the button stitch, I usually just unplug my foot and I'll use my start stop button, and then I will just start stop. It'll do the stitch, finish it out, tack it off, and stop. And so that's how I like to do it instead of having to just hold my foot on the foot pedal. So you can see I just have a regular foot. It has to, of course, accommodate a zigzag because it's going to zigzag because it's, of course, thinking it's putting a button on. So I have my pennant set up. Now this little pennant I just placed, I kind of looked at the picture and I have this other bow right under where I'm going to stitch it down. Now this is freestanding lace and this is pretty thick, and so I'm hoping that I don't break a needle. The first thing I'm going to do before I start and stop is I am going to just lower my needle, and I think it feels pretty good. It's pretty thick right there, but I'm just going to go for it. And I guess if I break a needle, then I might just tack this down by hand. But I have it set. I don't have it you know, exactly like in the same spot as this bow. I'm just going to tack it down. I'm using the same color thread, and it's just my embroidery thread that I used for making this little pendant, so it should just blend in. All right, so now to do this, I just will need to hit the start and stop, and you can see it just does the full round. I'm going to do that again, and that's pretty fast, so I'm glad it didn't break a needle. So now I've done it twice. I think that's good. I'm going to cut. And now I have stitched this little bow part on this side. So now you can see how fast and easy that is. So now I'm going to just smooth this down, figure out where I want it, which it kind of just lays where it's going to go. I think maybe about right there. So I'm just going to put that, again, I'm not trying to get, you know, in a perfect spot. I just kind of want to get it over the bow. I am going to, again, use my hand wheel just to make sure I'm not in a super thick, and I think that looks good. So I will just hold this, hit my start stop. I'm going to do that again. Again, I could just hold my pedal down, and even if I was holding my pedal down, it would still stop. And so I did that twice. I'm going to cut. And that is tacked down. Let me trim this little piece from the start. And now that's tacked down. I think that looks good. All right, so let's move on to a button. So at first I thought about just using that same foot to put the button on, but it was a little bit harder to see where it was going to stitch. So I'm going to try this with the buttonhole foot. So I have this buttonhole foot, this little piece, this little metal piece is kind of spring loaded, and you put your button in between that and it will, you know, it holds it. So I'm going to line up so that these two red little dots are lined up with about the center of the hole. Now my holes are a little bit bigger, but I think I have enough, you know, that this is going to work. They're not too wide. So I think that looks good. Now on my little foot, there is this plastic lever that if you push forward, this little clear, it might be hard to see because it's clear like this lever, comes out, and that is to tack a button down that will be maybe put into a shirt or a pair of pants, and you don't want the button tight to whatever you're sewing it to. You need it more like a shank on a button, and I don't want that. I want this flat and tight. So I want to make sure that this little lever is pushed back so that little bar, again, I know it's hard to see, is not coming down over the center of the button. All right, so I've got this. So let's see if this works. Now I did change my thread. This looks like it's you know, black. I'm using the hickory thread that I used for the black portions of this quilt, and that will look like the center, even though the center technically, that little black piece is kind of lower, but it's fine. All right, so let me put this on. So I have my foot on, I have the button where it's going to be, I have everything set up, I have my dark thread, which is the hickory color that matches the center, even though the center of this button is printed a little bit below. I'm going to use the hickory. So I'm all ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my hand wheel to make sure that I am not going to hit that button and break a needle, because this goes pretty fast. Okay, it looks good, and I'm gonna try. I don't know if you can lower the speed. All right, I'm just gonna go for it. All right, so I'm gonna put my presser foot down, and I'm going to hit start, and let's see. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. Now remember, if I was using my foot pedal and not the start stop, I would just keep my foot down on the pedal and it will stop even if my foot, you know, stays pressed down. I would have to take my foot off the pedal and do it again if I wanted to do it a second time. But I like using the start stop. All right, I did it twice. I think that's good. I'm going to cut and lift. And there is that button sewn on. There's a little piece of that start that kind of got sucked in, and so I have just a tiny piece. I'll just clip what I can. And there is that button sewn on. So fast and easy. All right, let me get set up for the next button. So my next button is the little butterfly, and I find it easier to take my foot off, put the button on, and then put the foot back on, and then kind of do a little bit of adjusting if I need to. But you could try to put your button on with not taking that off. So I have it set. Here's this little curlicue that comes in the sky. It's like the little trail of the butterfly. So I think that looks good. Now I didn't have a thread that was this yellow green, and I just picked a light green that hopefully will, you know, blend about as good as it can get. All right, so again, I am set, but I want to make sure that I'm not going to hit that button, and so I'm going to, that's pretty close, so I'm going to pull it down. I could tell just that I needed to move that. So I would always, whether you're doing just a regular button or, you know, some fancy button, always use your hand wheel to make sure that you are going in the right, because see, if I was over too far, so I need to push that over a little bit. And this, I'm hoping, you know, isn't too big of a hole, because it looks like I may be awful close. Ooh, that is really close. I mean, it's like to the very inside of both those holes. I'm going to go for it. You may hear a needle break, but, and I'm not sure if I can slow my machine down. Let me check something. Okay, so I have a little button right here that can be used for several different things. It can move the needle right and left if I change on my screen, or this can be used for only going so fast. So if you have it set to the slowest, even if you put your pedal all the way down, it will only let you go so fast. This would be medium, this would be fast. And that's what I have mine set up for now. I'm going to move it down and see if that button stitches slower. I'm not sure it will. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to hit my start stop, and we'll see if it goes slower than it did last time. Oh, it does. A lot slower. I like that. Okay, that's something new I haven't done, so I'm going to do that twice. And I've been kind of holding the button so it doesn't shift. All right, I like that a lot. So I'm definitely going to slow down when I need to. Now I'm done, so I can cut. And I'm going to raise my foot. And sometimes with this, because we have the quilt, we have the button, you have to manually go to the back and raise that even higher. And then pull, because you need to slide that button out. All right, so let me cut this little piece off. And I think that looks great. All right, so I did like slowing that down. All right, I'm going to set up for the next one. So I have my next little button that goes in the center basket, and I just have my linen thread. This has that linen was used for the center of the flowers that's stitched, and I've got it placed just at the top of this little stem. And again, these are close to being a little too wide. So I am going to hold that and just turn and make sure that it Oh, see, that is wide. This one, oh, that is like, oh, see, and that hit. And maybe if I just keep doing the hand wheel, it'll just tack off. Okay, so you can see that it's tacking off, which means it completed the whole round. So now it was doing the zigzag again, and so I'm going to do this one by hand because this one was awful close. Like right there, it's hitting, so I'm going to have to kind of move that over. So this one I am just going to do by hand. But you can see that it'll zigzag. It still is set for a zigzag, zigzag, and then tie off. So I can do it with my hand wheel. I can do it with my foot pedal. I can do it with the start stop. I could put that down. That would probably be better to hold it. But this is pretty tight. See right there it hit, so I'm going to have to move my button over a little bit. And I'm not sure why those other ones... And now you can see it's going up and down in the same hole, which means it's finishing that cycle. So, and then it zigged back, so now I'm done, so I'm going to cut. And that's how I had to do it with that one. I don't know why that one was so close, but it's on and it looks good. All right, let me get the next one. Now this little blue button goes on the first basket, and I am just putting it in the general area. This has the little cutout in the stitched flower because it gave you the option to stitch out that flower right here. And so on this petal and on this petal, they're actually not stitched full petals. One kind of has a little, cutout, and this one is just a little short one. It's hard to see. I think I'm good. I'm going to call it good and just go for it. Now for this one, it has like a dark blue center. So I picked a navy thread. It's not something that we used in the quilt, but it matches with this dark blue. All right, so again, I am going to turn my hand wheel. I'm going to pull this a little bit longer. Okay. And see if it clears. Kind of line, because these are... I think if I move it down, I might be able to... Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm on this little sweet, so I'm going to finish this one off and see how it does. I think maybe I'll cut this right now. Okay, let's try it. I am going to, keep pressure on this, even though the foot is down and it's got pressure. It makes me feel better. So let's hit this and see. Oh, I love that slow speed. And you can see I did a lot on my hand wheel, so it had just a few left. I'm going to do it one more time, and it will do one full cycle. And then tack off and I'll cut. That looks great. So then for this one, I'm going to lift up with the back with the presser foot and then slide forward because it was sitting on top of those little feet, and so you need to slide forwards to get the button out. All right, I think that looks really good. All right, I think I have one more. For the last button, it's these cute little sunglasses. It just needs to be put, kind of towards the top of the blanket. I just shifted my blanket so that they were a little bit angled, and I have a green thread that matches the green in this. And again, I'm going to use my hand wheel to see if I am going to clear. I didn't pull that, so that's kind of short. Okay, so let's see. That looks like it's going to hit, so let me make an adjustment. Ooh. I could hear that hit the side. Okay, I'm going to start, it's almost done with this whole cycle because I did so many turns. It was pretty close, so it's my last one. I hope that I haven't done all these and then break a needle on my last button. So let's do this. All right, so you can see it was almost done. I'm going to do it once more. And these buttons were really close. So I could have just held them on and zigzagged them on like I did the little pennant, but this button foot really does a good job holding it, and you know exactly where it's going to stitch. All right, it's done 2 cycles. I'm going to cut. I'm going to lift my presser foot and then kind of slide out. And then let me cut this off. And there is our cute sunglasses. All right, let's go take a look. So here are all the buttons. Here's the cute little sunglasses on the blanket for the picnic. And then on the 2 baskets, this is the yellow or orange flower. This is a cute little blue flower. And then the butterfly, this little button, and then our cute little banner. So the only thing I need to do is go ahead and put the little bow. So my frayed check has finished drying, and that, you know, just helps the ends stay. And I think I'm just going to hot glue this. Even though this is leather, I'm just going to put a little tiny dot and glue that right there. And I may put a little dot of glue on these little napkins that are hanging out of the basket. I might get it hung and see how it lays when it's, you know, on a wall looking at it. I might give them another, you know, really good press. So I may wait on that, but let me get my glue gun and I'll add just a dot of glue. So I'll just take this, I just have a little glue gun, just put a little dot. And glue it where I think it looks cute. All right, let's take a look at this cute quilt.